December 2012, Kyle Vaughan crashes his car on a dark stretch of road in South Wales and walks away. Minutes later, police arrive. The engine is still warm, the doors are open, the road is empty. No body, no phone, no trace. Within days, the case escalates to murder. 8 people are arrested, all from the same small area, but no one is charged. He was seen alive after the crash, stepping into the darkness. And then, in a window of just minutes, on a road where someone should have seen something, he vanished. This is the story of Welshman Kyle Vaughan. Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Kyle Vaughan came into this world on the 3rd of August 1988, born and raised in Newbridge, South Wales, a place where community ties run deep and familiar faces rarely go unnoticed. He was an only child, growing up in a close, family-centered household where his presence was constant and deeply felt. To his large circle of friends, Kyle was affectionately known as Jabbers. He wasn't just liked, he was the kind of person who others were drawn to, someone whose energy seemed to lift a room without effort. His father, Alan Vaughan, worked as a mechanical engineer, a steady and practical man, while his mother, Mary Lucas, was the emotional anchor of the home. Together, they built a tight-knit environment in which Kyle thrived. Despite living with diabetes and requiring regular insulin injections, Kyle never allowed his condition to define him. It was simply something he managed, quietly and routinely, in the background of an otherwise full and vibrant life. Alan would later describe Kyle's most defining trait as wearing his heart on his sleeve, a young man who felt things deeply but expressed them with humor. He was the joker of the house, quick with a comment, always ready to lighten the mood. Kyle attended Cumcan High School, where he got on well with both teachers and fellow pupils. Friends would later describe his personality as addictive and uplifting, the kind of presence that made ordinary moments feel better simply because he was there. Music was one of Kyle's greatest passions. He played multiple instruments: guitar, drums, organ, and even the xylophone. His love for rock music extended beyond listening and playing. Kyle was actively involved in the local scene, organizing gigs at TJ's in Newport and booking bands from as far afield as Germany. It demonstrated a young man capable of responsibility, organization, and connection within a wider network. At the time of his disappearance, Kyle was training as a technical engineer, working toward a stable future while supplementing his income with shifts at the pot noodle factory in Crumlin. Despite his busy routine, his bond with his mother Mary remained especially strong. In 2012, when she was undergoing treatment for throat cancer, Kyle stepped into the role of primary carer without hesitation. He became her support system at home, tending to her daily needs, offering comfort and ensuring she was never alone in her struggle. Against the odds, Mary recovered from her cancer, and much of that recovery was attributed to Kyle's unwavering care. Then came the 30th of December 2012. The festive season was in full swing, the kind of period where routines loosen and homes fill with warmth, noise, and expectation. Kyle spent the day at the family home in Newbridge with his parents. There was nothing unusual about the day. No arguments, no signs of distress, no indication that anything was about to change. In the early evening, Kyle told his parents he was heading to a friend's house in Abercarn. He seemed excited, animated, looking forward to the night ahead. There was no reason for concern. Little did his parents know that this would be the last time they ever saw their son again. That evening, Kyle was at a house party in Abercarn, socializing among friends. Those present described him as his usual self, relaxed, happy, and completely at ease. Nothing in his behavior suggested agitation or conflict. At some point during the night, he left the party and drove to a pub in Risca to meet other friends. Again, those who saw him there reported nothing out of the ordinary. He behaved normally, spoke as he usually would, and gave no indication that anything was wrong. Kyle then decided that he wanted to return to the house party in Abercarn, and so just before 11:30 p.m, he told his friends he was leaving. He left the pub, got into his car, a X-Reg silver Peugeot 306, and began driving northbound along the A467 carriageway. At 11:45 p.m, police received a call from a passing motorist reporting that a vehicle had just crashed along the A467 carriageway. What happened in the minutes that followed would become the central mystery of the case. Kyle was then seen by a witness exiting the vehicle after the crash. He was not reported as being trapped or incapacitated. Instead, he walked away from the car and into the nearby undergrowth, moving away from the road and out of immediate sight. Kyle was 5'8" tall, of slim build, with short dark hair and brown eyes. The witness described him as wearing a dark-colored t-shirt, 3/4 length denim shorts, white trainers, and wearing a gold chain. He simply vanished from the scene. When police arrived shortly afterwards, they found the damaged Peugeot 306 on the A467 between Risca and Crosskeys. The vehicle had clearly been involved in a collision, but Kyle was not inside. He was not nearby. He was not found during the immediate searches of the surrounding area. Officers would later repeatedly emphasize that this was a collision he would have been able to walk away from, suggesting it was not severe enough to cause life-threatening injury or prevent movement. And in those early days of the investigation, police stated that the car had been involved in a singular collision earlier that night and were not certain if Kyle had been the driver. However, in a 2020 Crime Watch appeal, they then confirmed their belief that Kyle had in fact lost control of the vehicle, crashed, and then abandoned it. The timing is critical. Police arrived soon after that 11:45 p.m. call, creating what can only be described as a narrow and highly significant vanishing window, a matter of several minutes on a road where, under normal circumstances, movement should have been visible to any passing motorists. The A467 in this area is semi-rural, with sections that are poorly lit at night. It is bordered by woodland, a river, old industrial land, laybys, side roads, and multiple access points. The nearby Sahawi River, which joins the Ebu River at Crosskeys, introduces terrain capable of concealing or destroying evidence, particularly in adverse conditions. This combination of darkness, geography, and access routes creates an environment where someone familiar with the area could move quickly and avoid detection. Kyle did not return home. He did not return to the party. He did not contact friends or family. From that moment onward, he was never seen again. At 3:10 a.m. on the 31st of December, the Vaughan household was suddenly jolted awake by a loud, urgent knocking at the front door. It wasn't the kind of knock you ignore or mistake. It carried authority, insistence, and something else that is harder to define but immediately unsettling. Alan Vaughan got out of bed and went to the window. Looking down, he saw a police car parked outside, blue lights flashing against the darkness of the early morning. 2 officers stood at the door. The officers informed him that he was under arrest on suspicion of drink driving and leaving the scene of an accident. The statement made no sense. Alan had been asleep. He had not been out. There had been no accident involving him. For a moment, there was only confusion. Then the realization began to form. The officers weren't talking about him. They were talking about Kyle's car. As the situation unfolded, it became clear to the police that they had the wrong person. Alan confirmed that his son had taken the Peugeot out that evening and, crucially, had not returned home. In that moment, confusion gave way to something far heavier, the first real indication that Kyle was not simply late, but missing. When Alan later viewed the crashed Peugeot, the sight of it left a lasting impression. He questioned how anyone could have walked away from that crash, remarking that he had seen vehicles in far less damaged condition, resulting in fatalities. Initially, Kyle's case was treated as a missing persons inquiry, but from the outset, the response was significant. Large-scale searches began almost immediately. Dog units were deployed across the surrounding terrain. A helicopter scanned from above. Forensics teams examined the crash site and nearby areas in detail. The search extended across mountainous ground, dense woodland, open land, riverbanks and fields, areas that were both physically demanding and naturally concealing. These efforts were not brief or superficial, they were sustained and coordinated. Kyle's parents did not stand back. For the first 4 days, they barely slept, joining search efforts and following any possibility, however small. Time stretched, blurred, and became defined only by the absence of answers. Over the next 11 days, Gwent police conducted approximately 40 coordinated searches in and around the area where Kyle was last seen. Nothing was found, no trace of Kyle. On the 2nd of January 2013, Gwent police issued a public appeal through the media. They detailed Kyle's last confirmed sighting on December 30th and provided a description of his appearance and clothing in the hope that someone, somewhere, had seen something that had not yet been reported. Then, on the 4th of January, a new and potentially significant piece of information emerged. Police revealed that they had received information suggesting that someone matching Kyle's description may have been hitchhiking on the A467 northbound between Risca and Crosskeys sometime between 10:35 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. on the night he disappeared. If accurate, this would place him on the road during the same critical window in which his car crashed and was abandoned. It raised immediate and troubling questions. While these questions circulated publicly, developments behind closed doors were beginning to shift the direction of the investigation in a far more serious and ominous way. Within a Gwent police station, information had come to light that suggested Kyle's disappearance may not have been accidental, nor the result of a lone set of circumstances. Instead, it pointed toward the possibility that another person or persons had been involved. This intelligence changed the tone of the investigation. Foul play, for which had not initially been the primary focus, was now being considered with increasing weight. Acting on this information, police quietly made the decision to escalate the case to murder. Kyle Vaughan's disappearance was formally upgraded from a missing persons inquiry to a murder investigation. But before this development became public knowledge, officers returned to the Vaughan family home to inform Alan and Mary directly. It was a moment that would permanently alter their understanding of what happened to their son. They would later describe the feeling as though something inside them had died. The possibility that Kyle was missing had been difficult enough to comprehend. The suggestion that he may have been murdered was something else entirely, a shift from uncertainty to something far darker, more final, and infinitely more painful. What then followed was a rapid and concentrated series of arrests in the local area. On the 10th of January 2013, a 27-year-old man from Blackwood was arrested on suspicion of murder. He was held and questioned for 4 days before being released on bail on the 14th of January. The following day, January 11th, a 62-year-old man from Newbridge was arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. He was released on bail on January 13th, pending further inquiries. January 13th came 2 more arrests, a 21-year-old man from Newbridge and a 15-year-old boy from Abercarn, both arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. They too were released on police bail the following day. On the 18th of January, a 22-year-old woman from the Newbridge area was then arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. She too is later released on police bail. On the 19th of January, a 24-year-old man from Blackwood is arrested on suspicion of murder. He is held for several days before being released on police bail. And finally, on the 22nd of January, a 27-year-old woman and a 28-year-old man, both from the Coombe-Vellenvac area, were arrested on suspicion of murder. After extensive questioning, they were also released on police bail. In total, 8 individuals had been arrested within this relatively short period, and all from the immediate surrounding communities: Newbridge, Abercarn, Blackwood, and Coombe-Vellenvac. The concentration of these arrests, both geographically and temporally, suggested something significant. It pointed toward the possibility of shared knowledge, overlapping connections, and a situation that extended beyond a single individual. Police reinforced their public appeals, placing roadside signs along the A467 and encouraging the community to come forward with any information, no matter how small. But despite the intensity of the investigation and the scale of police activity, something remained just out of reach. On June 12th, Crime Stoppers then announced a £5,000 reward for information leading to the whereabouts of Kyle and those responsible for his disappearance. Just 2 weeks later, on the 25th of June, the bail for the 8 suspects was extended further, now pushed back to September 2013. The extension prolonged uncertainty and reinforced the sense that the investigators were still working through something complex, something not yet fully resolved. Then, on October 28th, Gwent police returned to the ground for more searches. They initiated a 2-week research operation in areas close to where Kyle was last seen. Police divers were also deployed to search sections of the River Ebu near where Kyle's Peugeot had been found. By this stage, the scale of the investigation had grown significantly. Police had searched over 40 acres of land, they had interviewed more than 200 people, they had taken approximately 900 witness statements, and they had assessed around 180 separate intelligence logs. And yet, despite this level of activity, Kyle was nowhere to be found and the case was not progressing in a visible way. Then on December 5th, a major development dealt a heavy blow to the investigation and to the Vaughan family. 5 of the 8 suspects were released without charge. That same month brought further devastating news to the Vaughans. Mary Lucas was diagnosed with liver cancer. She had already endured one battle with cancer and survived it. This diagnosis came under very different circumstances. The stress, the uncertainty, and the emotional toll of Kyle's disappearance had been constant for nearly a year. Despite everything, Mary remained focused on one thing: finding her son. Despite searching more than 40 areas, nothing belonging to Kyle was ever recovered. Not his clothing, not his phone, not his keys, nor his wallet, not even his insulin supplies, items that would have been essential to him and unlikely to be voluntarily discarded. At the same time, investigators had reviewed more than 10,000 lines of telecommunications data, analyzed over 200 hours of CCTV footage from more than 100 locations, and examined approximately 2,000 separate pieces of property. Still, nothing concrete emerged. Over the next 2 years, the case slowed. Public updates became less frequent. The initial intensity of the investigation gave way to a quieter, more uncertain phase. Within the local community, rumors circulated persistently. The suggestion that Kyle had been murdered remained strong, discussed in private conversations and on social media, and passed between people who appeared to know more than they were willing to say openly. For Alan and Mary, daily life became something to endure rather than live. Simple routines were altered in ways that made their absence impossible to ignore. Each morning, instead of preparing breakfast for 3, they prepared 2, leaving an empty space where Kyle would normally sit. In February 2015, another decisive moment came. The remaining suspects, including those previously arrested on suspicion of murder, were released without charge. And with that, the possibility of imminent legal resolution effectively disappeared. No further arrests would be made in this case. Later that year, in December, Mary made a direct and deeply personal appeal through the media. By this point, she had been told her cancer was terminal. This is what she said: "I just found out I've got terminal cancer and I only have months to live. Somebody out there knows what happened to my son Kyle that night. So tell me, or tell the police where he is so I can bury him and put him to rest before I go. That's my only wish. I don't care if anyone gets charged or anything. If they do, that can happen later. But I just want Kyle to go on to rest before I go. I know he's dead. Somebody did something to him. We know what's happened to him, and I'd just like them to come forward and say." Despite the appeal, no one would come forward. On October 14, 2016, a High Court judge formally declared Kyle Vaughan legally dead. The decision provided legal closure in one sense, allowing a death certificate to be issued, but it did nothing to resolve the central question of what actually happened to him. On the 1st of January 2018, Mary Lucas died at the age of 56 from liver cancer. She died without knowing where her son was. Before her death, she had repeatedly expressed the wish that Kyle could be found and buried beside her. That wish remained unfulfilled. A headstone in St. Mary's Church now commemorates them both. At her bedside, Alan made a promise that he would never stop searching for their son and that he would bring Kyle home. In the years that followed, Alan described his life in stark terms. Days became routine, almost mechanical. Each morning began with the same underlying hope that this would be the day something changed, that information would surface, that a call would come. He stated that finding Kyle's body would mean more to him than anything else, more than winning the lottery. The chance to lay his son to rest beside Mary would, in his words, make him the happiest man in the world. There remains many unanswered questions in Kyle Vaughan's disappearance, primarily driven by the lack of publicly available information of the case. There are no details about the precise nature of the crash, no confirmed speed, no detailed road conditions, no mechanical analysis, no clear account of driver impairment, and no publicly disclosed forensic findings such as blood, fingerprints, or foreign DNA. Police emphasis has consistently remained on one point: Kyle was able to walk away. Equally notable is the lack of publicly disclosed digital evidence. Despite extensive analysis of telecommunications data and CCTV footage, no details have been released regarding Kyle's last phone activity, potential calls or messages after the crash, or indeed any confirmed sightings that captured him on camera. None of his personal items have ever been recovered. After more than a decade and after extensive searches involving specialist teams, dogs, and aerial support, this absence strongly suggests that evidence was not simply lost, but removed. The complete lack of recovery points toward the likelihood that Kyle's body was moved and concealed in a location not immediately accessible, potentially within woodland, along riverbanks, or on an industrial land within close proximity to the crash site. Another striking element of the case is the complete lack of available information regarding the 8 individuals arrested in January 2013. Their identities have never been released, nor have any confirmed connections to Kyle, their movements that night, or the specific intelligence that led to their arrest. Similarly, despite Kyle spending time at both a house party in Abercarn and a pub in Risca on the night he disappeared, no detailed accounts of those present, no comprehensive witness lists, and no fully disclosed statements have ever entered the public domain. Kyle Vaughan walked away from that crash, and within minutes, on a stretch of road where someone should have seen something, he simply disappeared. In the end, this is not just a mystery frozen in time, but a life interrupted and a family forever changed. Kyle Vaughan was more than a name in a case file. He was a son, a friend, a carer, someone who gave his time, his humor, and his heart to those around him. His mother Mary carried that love through unimaginable pain, holding on to hope until her own final days. And his father Alan continues to carry that weight still, a quiet, enduring promise to bring his son home. Whatever happened on that dark stretch of road, Kyle is not forgotten, and neither is the love that still surrounds him. Thank you for watching and listening to Kyle's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts, comments, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.